So, what did the judges say? Before we get to that, I want to do a whole review of the Georgia Celebrates Quilts Show. Hi, and welcome to Quilt Meets World, where we have adventures in piecing and joy. I'm Russ, coming into my sewing room. This was my very first quilt show that I had ever entered for, like the proper judge, jury, and everything else. I have volunteered my quilt for a couple shop events. So a few years back, there was a um, turning 20 quilt event at one of my shops. And then another shop has done a couple porch parties. Both of those are, viewer's choice. So, whoever can get the most friends there to vote for them. That's what I kind of call it. I do understand that there is usually like, a true best, but I'm not even going to go into my complaints with at least one of those shows. I'm not going to say which one it was and how it went, but, everybody's going to have issues with any type of an event. So, with the East Cobb Guild Quilt Show of Georgia Celebrates Quilts, that's what it is. The first thing that you had to do is register. I had a couple issues with that. The first issue that I had was uh, there was many inconsistencies in the website. The page said that you could have attachments up to one size, and every time that I kept trying to attach the photos, it kept rejecting it. I finally trimmed down a bit to be under a different size that I expect to be maximum uploads, and it worked. So the inconsistencies was just mildly annoying. If I didn't know how to modify image sizes, that would have been a bigger deal. It could have potentially been an issue for some people who aren't as tech savvy as I am. The other issue that I had with the website is one area said it was this price to enter a quilt, and then when it got to checkout, it was a different price. Again, I know mistakes happen, the website may not have been updated, and I thought it was a fair price still to enter the quilt, so I wasn't really going to complain about it. But again, when you have somebody who's especially in a fixed income, $2 or $3 is a bit of money at times. So they could have did a little bit better of, keeping their site updated, keeping the policies updated. But like I said, it happens every other year. Keeping a website updated is a lot of work, especially if it's not updated but every couple of years and stuff. So like I said, I'm not faulting them for it. It's just it would have been nice if it were updated. There's only a couple pages on there, so it shouldn't have taken much to have one or two people just go through the site and say, okay, these are where these are entered, these are where these, and just verify that everything works right. But yeah, it is what it is. The award ceremony, actually, no, let's go to the acceptance. Acceptance of everything was actually very simple. We got an email that said, congratulations, hey, your quilt was accepted. And they kind of strong armed you in that email saying, we specifically have a spot for your quilt. If you do not bring your quilt in, you are in big trouble, Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. So again, I fully encourage that type of communication. It felt a little bit harsh at times, but like I said, I understand why it's on the harsher side because many people will forget or they just say, well, I'm not feeling it, I'll just ignore it. So giving that sense of urgency, that sense of you have to do this, I'm all for. The award ceremony, just because there was nothing exciting about drop off was like the smoothest thing. But the award ceremony was Interesting for a few reasons. The bigger reason was the accident that happened that morning. I mentioned in my weekly vlog this past week that there was an accident that a vehicle went through the front door of the Cobb County Civic Center. Uh, Talking with some people who were there, they basically kind of said, if that pylon wasn't there, that vehicle could have gone down into further in and then down where the quilts are. So, I mean, that was good there. But that meant that it was hot in the building. I mean, Georgia in June is not necessarily, the coolest time of year. And because the window door area had been open up for most of the day, they had like no cool air coming in. It took a while for it to come down. I'm props to them for not delaying the ceremony, but that did leave it a little bit uncomfortable at times. I didn't know what the dress code was or anything, so I came in work attire because I was like, that seems to be the best option because it's casual enough that they can't fault me for dressing up, but it's also kind of on the nicer side because I was wearing a polo. Um, I could have gone in shorts and like basically my normal attire that I would go out to one of these things or what I wore to QuiltCon. Probably would have put shoes on instead of flip flops, but folks were dressed very casually for it. When I hear award ceremony, I think these big gala events, and it was a small chill event, warm chill event. uh, you're allowed to enter 3 quilts into the quilt show, and the award ceremony seemed to be a lot of repeated names. In some cases, I'm like, okay, like person would have entered into 3 different categories, and maybe they won 2 of the categories as the piecer. The quilter, though, they could have as many quilts as they want entered because their name is being attached to the person who pieced it. So there was a common theme when it came to quilters in this thing. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of what helps a quilt win is the quilting. So I kind of felt a little annoyed when I would see the same quilter's name in multiple ranks in the same category and then the same name across multiple categories. There's no way around that because not everybody quilts their own stuff. But you basically know if you've got a good quilter that you have a good chance of winning something, and it also means that the quilter has a chance of winning something. And then there was one category that was, I guess it was called Best Quilting or something like that. And I found it odd that the person who pieced it got the award and not the actual person who quilted it. Because it was, again, one of those person A pieced it, person B did the quilting. And again, it was gorgeous quilting. It was spectacular. I'm not faulting any of it, but there's just a few rules that seem a little odd when it comes to things like that. Like if somebody won an award and they didn't do the quilting, are they supposed to split the money with the quilter that they won? And then you got this whole thing, you have a quilter who has won, 5, 6 ribbons at that point. Like if they're getting a portion of that award money, they're getting a lot of kickback for that. So it just feels weird to me about that. But I also don't know how much prize money if you had a 2-person quilt versus a 1-person quilt was. So I don't know. Um, then that brings me to categories because back in the registration, I had no idea really what these categories meant. On the website, they just showed like the big awards from the past couple years. They didn't show, this is what an example of one person pieced versus one person applique versus one person special technique. They've got a description of it, but I'm not a word person. I prefer to see examples of what they mean. And since I hadn't gone to a show that show before, I didn't know really what to do. It was difficult for me to figure out, okay, what should my category be? So I just went to the simplest. It's a two-person quilt because I pieced it and a friend of mine quilted it because that was before I had my long arm. And it was a pantograph quilt. I made sure I put that on there. But there was no real special piecing technique. I couldn't call it a kit because it wasn't a kit. It was a pattern and fabric that were separate. So that's technically not a kit. So I think if they had either more bucketed categories, so you can say, I have a pattern, but I bought my own fabric versus, I have the pattern and fabric together that was purchased together. I think that would have made it easier, but at the same time, it's given me ideas of what I should do differently for the next show if I enter into a next show. Uh, it's it just, like I said, it feels weird. Even going to QuiltCon, the way that they have their categories was significantly different than the way Georgia Celebrates Quilts had their categories. So I don't know what to do. A lot of it for me is going to be easier now that I have my own long arm. Now that I'm learning how to try to do a little bit of this free motion stuff myself. I still have no idea where to start when it comes to custom quilting something, but it takes time to learn. One day, maybe in like 30, 40, 90 years, I'll have that figured out. The quilt show itself was amazing. Uh, except when you would see certain categories that you're like, or I'm sorry, not certain categories, certain quilts in certain categories, and you're like, I know that quilt. There were two Saturday sampler quilts in there in two separate categories, and it just seemed a little weird. Just the fact that they somehow got into two different categories. I don't know how it just could have been that's what they decided to pick. Because technically, Saturday Sampler should go under kits, which one of them was under. The other one ended up being put under one person pieced, I believe, if I remember correctly. But either, or it could have been under two-person piece. It could have been a separate quilter. But either way, it was, like I said, odd seeing the same quilt in two different categories. So there was that. I saw two of the Heartburst quilts, different colorways. Again, they all look incredible, but once you've seen one, you've seen basically any of them. Again, not taking away from any of the talent that they did to put them together because I know it's a lot of work. I just, because of the number I have seen out there, I feel like that's not a great choice for something that you want to show off. It's the same thing with the famous paper piecing patterns that you see that all look alike. I'm not going to name any names because I don't want people to get upset at me, but there are a handful of paper piecing designers that, if you look at all of their designs, they all kind of look the same. I mean, yeah, you got your talent and this is how you like to put things together, but it's starting to get to be like other programs that I have been a part of that once you've done one, they all end up looking alike. No matter even if you change the colors or anything like that. So I just I feel kind of weird that people think that it's a great idea to enter something that is as common as that. Because, like I said, if you look at the winter stuff, it is 100% unique. I don't. There may have been a pattern for Best in Show, but obviously, the quilting was all custom and everything else. When it came to a lot of the other patterns that won, a lot of them weren't like mass produced patterns or kits or something like that everybody is doing. Even if it is a pattern, it's something that not many people are doing. And I was going to say that could have been the fault of my quilt, but based on when the pattern came out, I don't think that anybody would have put it in, because it would have been like a 2 month time period for them to put a quilt together and get it entered into the show for last year. So, uh, but who knows? They could have seen in their other stuff that type of quilt any other time. Either way, but the quilts were gorgeous. They had them on display very nicely. They had them hung as well as they could. There was a couple that I don't think that they read the sleeve instructions very well, because they got draped onto the floor by a couple inches. The instruction said if your quilt is larger than such and such, you have to make sure that your hanging sleeve is low enough so that it will hang and not touch the floor. And there was like 2 or 3 quilts that I remember seeing kind of draped on the floor. If the people didn't mind their quilt being draped on the floor, that's fine. If they were upset, I think it's their own fault. Uh, Hearing other people, like other quilters, talk about quilts is interesting. Uh, After the awards show on Wednesday, those of us who attended the awards, which were only people who entered a quilt and a guest, uh, we got to go see the quilts firsthand. So everybody down there was basically a quilter, or maybe a quilter spouse, or child, or brother, or sibling, or something like that. But basically, at least 3/4 of the people were probably quilters. And just hearing random thoughts throughout the show, or throughout the setup, was pretty interesting. You would hear people say, well, all they did was, put a pantograph on this, and uh, it's a whole cloth quilt, but all they did was a digital pantograph on it and this. And I'm like, on one hand, yeah. On the other hand, they didn't get an award. So, but it's unique enough that I thought it was really cool. I thought it should have been in the show. And there are a lot of techniques that a long armer needs to do to make sure that even if you do a whole cloth quilt as a pantograph, you need to make sure that your tension stays exactly right all the way through, or you're going to have a different size at the bottom versus top. You have to make sure you roll it right. You have to make sure you keep your threads stopped at good points. So there's a lot of stuff that has to go on, even if it's a whole cloth quilt as a digital pantograph. So again, I think there's still a lot of talent, but hearing some of the negativity towards other quilters, where somebody didn't think they put in enough effort, or that this is my favorite, I would have done it in these colors. And while that's a valid comment for you, I think that's an inside voice comment, not an outside voice comment, because everybody's color choices are unique to them. They're not unique to the world. They may really love the color choice that they picked. There may be reasons that they picked those color choices and stuff. But saying, I would have done it this way, or I would have done it that way, that's just, in my opinion, not helpful advice in any session because, again, you're two different people. You would have had two things. So, yeah, just hearing those weird things, it's a little off putting, but like I said, I know it's quilters being quilters. That's the only thing I'll say. It's a weird thing, and I try to keep the positivity about it and that, but I know I'm even guilty of it too. There's been a couple times where I look at something, I'm like, you made that color choice, but I keep it as an inside voice. I do not want to hurt somebody's feelings inadvertently. Who knows if somebody was talking about, quilt XYZ and the person who made the quilt was there. I mean, words could be said, or the quilter could have just completely ignored it and said, you're a jerk face. I don't know. So yeah, just there's a lot. There was a lot of words that shouldn't have been said. Is just all I'll call it. And like I said, I have no problem with people thinking stuff, but there's inside voice and outside voice. The vendors, that surprised me. It's the East Cobb show, but I know that it's all of Georgia, and I think that's what didn't properly click. Because I was like, okay, I know that there's, you know, the couple shops that I frequent in this area, and I know that there's a few that are just outside of my normal putzing zone, I'll call it. And I kind of expected them to be there, and some of them were, some of them weren't. I was excited to see that there was stuff that wasn't quilting there. We did have an embroidery shop there, and I spent a bit more money than I should have. But, it was there, it was convenient, and I didn't have to think later, I need to go hunt down these patterns and see what it is. Although there is a pattern I need to hunt down because it wasn't available at the booth when I was looking. Um, so I did buy stuff because there was stuff there that either was about to be sold out or they hadn't had in the shop yet. Uh, but again, it's really fun stuff, and I say I'm not going to buy something, but that doesn't stop me. Yeah, the the prices were basically what you would find in the quilt shop. There was no discountification on anything. I know at shows at like QuiltCon or the Atlanta Sewing Expo or things like that, there'll be a few long arm booths set up, and they will basically say, we'll give a discount for somebody who wants to buy this equipment right here, right now. I did not pay too much attention to see if any of the other shops had a long arm set up, but I know like one of the shops that I frequent, they're a handy quilter dealer, so they had their whatever the smaller one is that has the moving frame. I can't. I think it's like a. I'm not even going to say the name because the word that was about to come out of my mouth is not the name. It's a different name brand. So, yeah, it was kind of interesting, and they weren't selling their floor model because it was needed for a class the next morning. So, yeah, it was kind of weird in that, but like I said, I kind of fully expected that because they're individual shops. It was a smaller show. I forgot how small the Cobb County Civic Center could be. I've only seen it from the outside until this past week, and it's not large inside. I know that there's probably some rooms off to the back that I didn't get to, but it seemed a little small, but they were able to fit in over 350 quilts. And I know that it's over 350 because I counted the number of photos that I had taken, and I had to divvy them up into the 9 videos that you saw. Probably certain you're sick of that song that I had playing. I didn't have time to really go hunt for other songs that would have fit the same mood. I think that that fit a really good I'm browsing through and looking at things mood. I know my normal montage thing is a very chipper do 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 do. But I don't think that that would have worked well with this. I think I played my QuiltCon videos to that, but that was just because I was too exhausted to think about anything else, and that worked. Um, so yeah, there was over 350 quilts, and on the website they were like, yeah, there's gonna be about 300 quilts, and when you increase it by 50, that's kind of shocking. But what we are most interested in is what did the judges say on my quilt? I haven't opened this yet, so I am opening it with you. Um, I have been told that this can make some people cry. And I think those people that cry are probably people who put effort into a quilt specifically for a quilt show. I did not create my quilt specifically for a quilt show. I created my quilt to be used, to be loved, to be snuggled up with, and I just happened to enter it into a show. So I am taking every word that's in this envelope in that heart because I did not make this for a show. So let's see what the judges had to say. Okay. So I got some G's, some VG's, some NA's, and a T. No, that's an E. Okay. So let me read what these say. For visual impact, I got a VG, which is very good. For design, or under the category design, for color and fabric, I got a VG. And then for the other categories, which is use of design principles, unity, movement, proportion, scale, balance, and then degree of difficulty, and complexity of design, and then quilting design enhances the top, uniform distribution is sufficient. Those all got a G, so a good. For workmanship, for piecing techniques, which is smooth, flat, tight, precise seams, no shadowing through, I got an E, which the seams were not all tight. I've mentioned a few things that I have this little bit where, you know, I'll fold it over, and if it's close enough, there might be a little bit under there. So I'm kind of surprised I got an E there. For borders and sashing, I got an E. That they're smooth, flat, straight, and appropriately sized. I've told you before, I am a little OCD when it comes to my borders, so that is very good news for me. Quilting techniques, which is technically not me because I didn't do the quilting. Even stitches, tension, marking, start stops not evident. It got a VG. Like I said, I didn't do the quilting. I know who did, so that was pretty cool. Finishing techniques, corners, binding, or other edge finish, back, smooth, straight, consistent widths, binding filled, corner square. I got an E. Again, I like to do very particular stuff when it comes to my binding. If I'm going to be doing, oh, now I'm reading something. I read ahead. I'm sorry. But I know how I like to do my hand binding when I do hand binding. Most of the time, I'm now doing machine binding because if my quilt is going to be used and stuff, I want it to last. And hand binding, to me, it feels like it's not as strong as machine binding, but I know it is. It's just hand binding takes forever. For the comments, I got the phrase inclusion of hearts in this simple modern design elevates the presentation. Selections of fabric really presents relaxed summer living, which is a lot of what I had felt. And then apparently it tells me at the bottom that there was a mark on the quilt in the lower left block in the white area. So I'm going to have to go look at this quilt to see what it means. Hold on for half a second. So I have been hunting and I found it. Where did it go? Right there is a little mark. Right here. I don't know where it came from, how it appeared, or anything else. Um, Seriously doubt it was anybody at the quilt show. It probably was at the porch party last year because this quilt was in the porch party. I'm sure giving it a little bit of a wash will clear it out. I did not go over the quilt with a fine tooth comb. I did look at it and nothing stood out. I had to hunt for a minute or two before I even found that little bit of a blemish. So props to them for knowing exactly how to look for things. So I'm pretty excited. Uh, am I happy with this? Probably. Uh, I didn't expect, E's, and I got a couple E's. I mean, this is a report card. Very, very exciting. It tells me what I'm doing good. So, the workmanship, which is really the hard part of doing a quilt, I'm doing the right direction. So, I'm doing good piecing techniques. I'm doing good borders. I'm doing good finishing on things. So, the parts that I would say are the hard. I'm they're the easy parts because they're the things that are consistent. You have a lot of tools with, but they're also hard for a lot of people because people are like, well, I don't know how to get a 1/4 inch seam, or I don't know how to get this. And I'm gonna be honest, there's a lot that I flubbed. I may end up in my vlog this week if I can get a couple good photos of things that look a little flubby. I will see what I can do. I may even throw them here. I don't know. It'll be a surprise where they show up. But it was I'm very happy. It tells me also what they're looking for because I only got like G's in design principles and difficulty. Again, I did not make this for a quilt show. I made this for me. So I didn't expect to have, a high level of difficulty because the pattern went together in what, a day and a half. So there's things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm just like, this is what's expected. Again, I didn't make this for a quilt. This does put a little bit of a hamper in the idea that I have in my head because I have in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I want to do this for maybe the next quilt show. It's going to be done either way, but like I want to. I was thinking about maybe it'll be a good entry into the East Cobb show in 2 years because it's an interactive quilt. What I'm going to be making. That's all the details you get. I don't know if I'm going to let anybody see it until it gets entered, but it's definitely going to be interactive. And I know when people think interactive, you're going to touch it and stuff. No, it doesn't get touched, but it's still interactive. I just got to make sure, I can get the design put together. And I've got 2/3 of it already designed out. I got to figure out what I'm going to put at the bottom just to keep it a little symmetrical because it's kind of in thirds, even though they're not really thirds. But either way, yeah, it's going to be a fun quilt no matter what, and I'm excited for it. But yeah, I'm I'm happy with these judges' critique or judges' comment sheet. So that I think means I had a very, very exciting show. There was, like I said, it's just people being people when it comes to things, and the accident that unexpectedly happened, and that am I going to enter a show in 2 years? A Quilt in the Show? I probably will, just because one, it gives me early access to the show, and two, it will force me to remember to um, actually go see the show. I've had many years in the past where I find out basically at 4 o'clock on Sunday or on Saturday that a quilt show is happening, and I'm like, well, that doesn't give me enough time to get there. And I'm told ahead of time. I just completely forget. It gets off my timing. It gets off my calendar. So I think those two reasons will really like kick me in the butt to make sure I enter something. What I'm going to enter, I don't know. Like I said, I have that thing in the ideas. Something else may appear. I may get a really cool kit that I want to enter that I have ideas for. I may get something else that I want to enter that I get ideas for. We'll see. I've got basically a year and a half to fully fledge out and get it done before it has to start to be entered. Anyway, I think that is going to be about it for today. You've had a lot of videos come out from me this week. Basically, it's been every day since Saturday because I've had my live on Saturday. I had my vlog on Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday each had 3 videos of quilts, and then today, Thursday, you are getting a recap of the quilt show and the reading of my judges' comments. Thankfully, Friday is going to be a little bit of a day off for me before I figure out what is going on for Saturday. So, if you wouldn't mind, give the YouTube algorithm some love. I would greatly appreciate it as it helps the channel grow. You can do that by commenting, liking, smacking the subscribe button, or eating some M&Ms because those always make you feel happy. If you ring the bell next to the subscribe button, you will be notified when I go live on Saturday mornings or when I upload any of my videos from my weekly vlog to, like I said, all these videos that you've gotten this week. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and an awesome week. Until next time, stay happy and keep stitching.